Hi, I'm Paul Marcel. I'm about to start on my next project, which is going to be a vanity for the guest bathroom up in my own home. The reason I say that is because for some reason projects for your own home always seem to get pushed off onto the back burner for other people's projects. So I'm glad I'm going to be getting this done finally, especially since this granite top has been sitting in my family room now for about 2 years. So the idea is that we're going to build the base for this vanity and then just of course put the granite on top. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to do this as more of a sculpted vanity. So the vanity base itself is going to be made out of mahogany. It's going to be shaped a little like a T, and I'll go over that a little bit here in sort of this design phase. And it'll be suspended on the wall. There won't be any feet going down to the ground. So of course we also have to make this strong enough to be able to hang on to a really heavy granite top that I just moved 4 times today. Now the material for this project that I chose is mahogany. I recently went to Woodworker's Source and they have just, it's all wood porn over there. It's really gorgeous wood. And they had a special on some mahogany, and when they got the fresh shipment in, I work right across the street from there, which is a plus and a minus in my life. So I found a lot of quarter sawn mahogany in the stack, so it has a lot of ribbon figure in it. Now all of this is pretty similar ribbon figure through all these boards. A couple have a slightly different color, so I'll have to see how I'm going to lay that out to make the cabinet. Now for my master bedroom, I have a walk-in closet, and I made a built-in cabinet in the closet made out of sapele. And it's got somewhat of a carved front to it. Now the carved front is mostly just a progressive cove. I really like it. The more I see it, the more I like it. But I wanted to do something similar in effect on this vanity, but of course not the same thing. So this is going to be a carved front on this vanity, and since it's in a guest bath, it's a great way to practice that, because if it doesn't quite look right, it's only the guests that will not like it and then leave. So the front of this vanity is going to be shaped a little like a T. So we can picture that one of these mahogany boards will be located here, stretching all the way across the front of this vanity. Now the T section, the stem, will be the width of the sink more or less, just because we have to get around the plumbing and the P-trap and everything else going on down there. And that'll drop down and descend, and then it'll stop about 8 inches or so off the ground to give that suspended look without wasting a lot of space. Now the plumbing on here comes out about 8 inches is how far I have to allow for it. So given that this is about 24 inches deep, and by the time we recess this back for the front and then recess back again, I want the drawers to be further back than this T section, so the drawers will be lining up, say, back here. We're still going to be able to get drawers that are about 16 to 18 inches deep, and the current one that I have has really small drawers that only open up about 9 inches if you're lucky. So there's no capacity in there right now. So this is actually, though it looks like I'm going to be losing a lot of space by having a T structure, I'm actually gaining a lot because it's much more functional. Now I've been talking about sculpting this front, but I haven't really described how I plan on doing that. What I'm going to have is this T section and then the vertical part in the middle. I want the drawer fronts all the way up to the top, including this is going to be considered a drawer front on this top, since there'll be a drawer here and a drawer there, and basically, the center section just be a dead region because of the bowl. But the front, I would like it to actually have kind of a coral pattern. If you've ever seen how coral kind of goes up a little bit in random directions as it crawls its way up, having an embossment that looks like coral on the front of this, and actually expanding out from the inside core of that T and into this top part of the T, continuing on as if it was one full picture without the parts missing, I think it will be really sharp. And it'll also be a nice way to make, when I'm talking about the coral, I don't want it to be really abrupt changes. I want it to be smooth changes. So there'll be a very tactile feel to the whole front of these drawers. And the way I want to carve that, of course you can get a grinder and put a grinding wheel on there and go to town and spend the next 4 months trying to clean all the dust out of your shop, which is why you go do it at a friend's shop. What I want to use is I'm going to use the RAS 115 from Festool. Now this isn't really a grinder per se, but when you put, like in this case here, a P24 sapphire disc on there, it's pretty much like grinding an alleyway on it. It'll take away material very, very quickly. In fact, I was doing a little bit of sampling with the P24 sapphire on this piece of just some very old 2x4 stock that I cut. But carving this away to make this sort of a smooth curve actually took very, very little time. Now, of course, there's a lot of rough machine marks on here, but that would be why after you go through the P24 sapphire, then you're going to go up through the 36 and 50 grit before ultimately hitting like an 80 grit to just finish and finesse all the smoothing. So you'll see how I'm going to use the RAS 115 for that. The reason why I'm choosing the RAS is, for one, it is a little less aggressive than using a grinder, especially with some of those microplane discs on it. So it'll give me a little bit better control for that reason. You know, I don't need to finish it in 10 minutes. I wouldn't mind taking 30 minutes to get it done right. And at the same time, it's nice that this head rotates in order to capture dust. So there's a vacuum port that comes out here, and I can turn this to angle it to catch the dust wherever it's coming off tangentially from the pad. Now, when I did, say, this sample here, yes, there was chips on the floor. So there were a lot of chips, but for the most part, what you get are just chips landing right underneath where you're working. You don't get anything in the air. Like, I never smelled pine at all, and I should have been able to smell some pine while doing this. So it's probably the closest thing you're going to get to dust-free, clean grinding. Now, of course, as I said, there's a lot of machine marks on here, so I wouldn't want to leave it that way. That's not the look I'm going for, although that could actually be a nice look. So what I'll be using also is the RO90 because of its smaller head. I'm going to use an interface pad on it. Let me get this granite off. And I'll be using one of these soft interface pads so that I can get into some of these curves a little bit easier in order to finesse them with like an 80 grit paper, or maybe even skip the 80 grit and go to 120 directly, simply because I would want it to go a little slower and chew away the wood slower than I do wanting shaping. Now, in order to sand some of these sharper corners and get into smaller nooks and crannies than the RO90 can get into natively, what I was thinking of using are some of these sanding heads. Now, this is a sanding head that you can attach to a drill. I'm sure you've seen them. You can, of course, attach some of this kind of funky looking paper that has the fingers on the side to it, and the fingers will bend on the side so that you're not going to be digging into the material, and you'll actually be sanding up on that curve. This is a relatively stiff pad, but there are, of course, interface pads that you can stick on in between. Now, this is going to be nice and soft, so it'll make it really easy to get into those corners. Now, the problem with this is that there really is no dust collection with it. You're holding onto a drill. It works. It worked very well. In fact, I used this on the cove that was on that cabinet in my master closet, and it worked exceptionally well. Now, this is the 3-inch pad and mandrel piece. There is also a 2-inch pad and mandrel piece. Now, I am not going to actually use the mandrel piece, but instead what I'm going to do is attach this directly to the RO90. So if we attach that down on the bottom, it looks a little bit funny, but at the same time, it can get down in there, and you know, I might not be able to get on a full turn because of this outer pad, but it will let me get a little bit further in. And the reason why I'd want to use this is simply because if you look at the hole pattern for the dust collection, this fits right inside there. So now as the dust is getting kicked up from the sanding pad, these holes should be able to pick up most of it. And that's actually one of the problems I had when I was using this one here on the drill, is that you would do a little bit of work and you'd have to stop and get rid of all the dust, otherwise you're just grinding the dust right back into the work. Okay, so I decided to put the little pad on there and give it a try. Why not? So we're just going to try it out on this little piece of 2x4 and see if we can get into these curves. Now, this valley is actually much narrower and steeper than anything I imagine is going to be on this carving. So if it can do this, we'll be golden. So just got that on there with a little 120 grit piece of paper. Well, this is only 120, and I could have actually used some 80 grit, which I actually am out of right now. That smoothed up the machine marks that we had going here, and honestly, there's no dust here. Now, I didn't do a lot, but still. Let's go and do a little bit more, just for fun. Paper's basically clean, and again, I really should be doing this one at 80 grit, but that's nice and smooth right now. I mean, there are some deeper machine marks for sure that I'll need to get rid of otherwise, but that was all I've got. So I'm definitely going to be liking this idea. It looks like it's going to be a good one. So I brought you in a little closer so I can show you what the design is ultimately going to look like. What I showed here is this is, the floor, and then this is the thick granite top up here, and the representation of the sink. Not at all to scale. I'm not really good at doing that, or SketchUp, but I'll learn that someday. So what I would like to do is for this T section, this is going to come down approximately 5 inches. So not really to scale at all, but we're going to go 5 inches. It's going to go all the way across, except hopefully my cuts will be a little straighter than my drawing. So it'll be going 5 inches down, and it'll start right at the edge of the granite, just inset a little ways. Mostly inset enough so that any of the carved relief won't be proud of the edge of the granite. We'll pull that in a little bit. Now then the center section, and this is approximately, on either side of this sink, this is going to be approximately 21.5 inches. These sides here are 14, and you can see my scale is absolutely horrible. This column here is going to be of the drawers. So that's going to go down. And we're going to leave approximately, and this isn't a hard fast number, but just in and around 8 inches. The height that I'm looking for, the vanity that exists there is currently only at, I think it was 31 inches. I'm going to be bringing this one here up to either 36 or 37. So I'll put 36 to 37 here as a height. That's the height of the vanity that I have in my master bathroom. That's really nice. Now this one here, it's approximately 2 inches thick. And then we're going to go for a drawer. A useful drawer would be about 3 to 4 inches deep for contents. So let's just call this about 5 inches here. By the time we have the drawer webbing and of course some of the structural support that's going to be necessary underneath and all. So we'll be getting ourselves down to, this is about the 30-inch mark here. Then we got 8 down there, right? So we're gonna be going for about 22 inches in this stack. Now this stack again here, this portion is going to be recessed back from this top portion that I'll be doing. It's just going to go recess back just a little bit, mostly just to get it away. In a way, it's going to be a bit like a toe kick, kind of the same function, because of course the person using the sink is going to be standing right here. And nothing is more annoying than banging your knee on the drawers. So now when we got about 22 inches to go there, we have to decide, well, how are the heights of the drawers? Now, of course, there's going to be structural members here, and then there's drawer webbing in between. But ultimately what I care about is that this whole front is going to look solid except the kerfs that are going to be between the drawers. That's the part that we care about seeing what it looks like, since that's going to be the visible portion. So I'm thinking, well, with 22, I mean, I could go for some drawers that are about 6 inches, maybe some that are 5, some that are 4. We could work that out too. Because of the 22, I could have a 6 in the bottom, maybe 2 5s, and then a 4, and then I'd have a couple inches left to play with, because there would be probably 1 inch up here to, you don't want that rubbing against the top. Or we might be able to balance that out so that they all go down in a progression. Have this as a 3, 4, 5, and a 6 or something for the way that the progression goes. So for this build, I'll be doing the initial work is going to be to build the wireframe kind of structure for holding all this up against the wall, because the mahogany is more or less going to be attached. Now, if you noticed the way I put the mahogany down on the front of this vanity, I have the grain going sideways. So the grain is going to be going this way. That's the look that I want, because that's where the ribbon is going to be going. So I'm looking for the striped ribbons to be going horizontally. I have to account for the wood expanding down, and then of course expanding here. So those are all things that we're going to have to take into account when we attach the mahogany to the framed structure on the bottom. I mean, none of it's tricky. You just got to think about it ahead of time and work your way into having a way to support it that doesn't involve brad nails. So that's where this build is going. I'm hoping that you'll follow along, and we'll have a little bit of fun putting together some of the structural components that are holding on to something heavy, and dealing with the racking forces, and how to not just rely on, oh, use epoxy, it's strong. No, you have to make these members work against each other so that they help reinforce themselves. And then ultimately, of course, getting to some sculpting, which should be a lot of fun. I have not done something this large with the RAS. I've tinkered around with some smaller parts and things like that. And sometimes when I was stripping off varnish, I ended up inadvertently sculpting with the RAS. That can happen too.